Go ahead.
My name is Trevor Johnson, and I am interviewing Otis Woodard on the topic of civil rights. The time is 5 p.m. and the date is March 30th, March 20th, 2014.
Okay, put that underneath. There we go. All right.
What is your full name?
Otis David Woodard.
We've got it here.
When were you born?
December the 9th, 1936.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, in Loveman's Village.
What was your life like in Birmingham?
It was like all other black people who lived in Birmingham. We lived under an oppressive segregation there, which meant that everything was ruled by signs that said whether you were white or black, and they pretty much controlled where you could go and where you could not go. Voting was the goal of black people, which was unobtainable to most. My dad was the first person I knew voted in my neighborhood, but he kept trying, even under threats of house bombings and beatings. My dad would go and try every year, and he would undergo questionnaires, one by paper and one by people sitting at a table firing questions at him, such as how many windows are in the courthouse, and how many steps were there from the sidewalk to the courthouse, and how many officers were in the courthouse. They would always add one, and he would miss it and come back home and research it like you would do a paper. And the last question that he missed after many unsuccessful tries, the last question he missed, and he said that he missed it after they went through a long waiting time trying to come up with another question, was how many white women's restrooms were there in the courthouse. But they understood my dad could never get near them, so that was pretty much a question that if he would have answered it, he got beat up.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the truth.
What did your parents tell you about racism?
They taught me how to survive. They told me that if I was walking down the sidewalk and a white person was walking at me, that I should step off the sidewalk, and that if one would talk to me, that I would never look in their eyes like I'm looking in yours, and never speak and never show anger, because anger would get you beat up. So she taught me that if someone said something to make me angry, that she learned me how to smile. So when I talk about something painful, you'll see me automatically smiling. But that's a learned piece of conduct that used to keep me alive as a black person in Birmingham. And she taught me that if I could keep alive, and then if I could keep reading, and if everybody would keep voting, that maybe they would change the laws that govern us, and that things would get better for me. But my goal was to stay alive. That was it.
All right. What did your parents say to you to make you feel safe and secure?
My parents tried to make me avoid. They tried to avoid letting me see the ugly things. They tried to hide them and not let me see people getting beat up. Or they tried not to let me see pictures of people being hung. They tried to protect me and keep me and keep me safe. But at a time, my parents knew that I was gonna have to defend myself against people who would try to hurt me or try to hold me down. So my parents had to teach me the ugly side of racism, even though they didn't want to. They had to teach me so I wouldn't have no kind of false expectations, and that I wouldn't get killed. My mother and daddy tried to teach me the good things about life and the pretty things, and I ended up dancing ballet in high school, and I ended up liking opera music and classical music, my dad would go out and buy a big old long playing record that would have classical music on it so that I would hear that. So even under the situations they lived, they tried to show me as many beautiful things as they could. But it was very hard to keep it from me.
What early feelings and memories do you have about being black in the southern states?
Well, I remember going to school and I would pass maybe about 6 or 7 very good white schools to get to a very inferior black school. I remember reading books that they never had any backs on them. They were all ragged secondhand books, and we would share books a lot of times when we had to. A pencil and paper was a real valuable thing. If you got a good pen or a good piece of paper, you were really great. We hardly ever had a book bag. I didn't even know what that was. But I remember that all my classes were black, and that some of the children that I started in nursery school with, I graduated with because we only could go to the black schools. So we always were together. Mm-hmm. In my neighborhood, every black kid went to one elementary black school and one high school, and so we were always very close together.
I'll wait for the sirens to pass.
Yes. Yes. You're in a neighborhood that is definitely full of those sounds, and every then an occasional gunshot.
Mm-hmm.
That's always fun.
Yeah, right.
All right. What was it like living in Birmingham during the 1950s and 60s?
That was a two-pronged day for many of us in high school. We would study in the daytime and march in the evening time. We'd all head downtown and we'd march, and some of us would go to jail. We knew that if we marched for our parents. We really marched to call attention to the voting and the inferior housing that we lived in. And so we learned the politics of racism real early in high school. One morning, in the morning, we would learn geography and learn English and history and math, and then in the evening, we would learn what an oppressive government that could be created when it's a segregated government and white people weren't allowed to take part. So we learned about the politics very early, and many of our classmates, as a matter of fact, all of us can give experiences about going to jail when we were still in high school. So we loved every bit of high school. We loved every moment we got of education. We were hungry for education. We hated when school was out because, we'd go home and we wouldn't have no food. So we wouldn't have food and lights sometimes. So we loved school. So getting out of school was not fun for us. It was kind of miserable.
Right.
We wanted to be in school. And every summer school, every time they were offered summer school, well, we would go. We would go. If I could get into summer school, I would go because in Birmingham, they gave you credits for going to school. It wasn't the grade, it's how many credits you accumulate. And you accumulate so many credits, then you graduated. And, of course, I wanted to graduate so I could help my mom and dad by working. And so when I was 15 years old, I was out. I had enough credits. They just put me out. I went right to the Marine Corps.
Yeah, we've got questions about that too.
Tell me about your church.
My church was the neatest thing about my life at home. We would go to church, and the church taught you about the power that Jesus gave you. He gave us courage to face things. You understand if you're marching and going to jail, praying that your house won't get blown up, or praying that you don't meet somebody who will just beat you up. Our prayer was for real things. So when we go with the church, it would sometimes be very intense. And because our pastor was white, we were scared they were going to blow him up and blow his church up. because he sometimes the retailers in my neighborhood in town would not sell to him because he was a white man preaching in a black church and living in a black community. And we would sometimes check on him at night to see if somebody had blown him up or set him on fire. We would call and say, "Are you all right, Pastor Walter Shindy Pastor Elwanger?" We said, "We heard an explosion." We'd say, "Are you okay?" And he had all of his services at daytime. We had nothing at night because he was afraid we might be in the church when it was burned or blew up. So he had everything that we attended at in our church was in the daytime. And our church was little at first. It was a mission church because they didn't have no Lutheran churches for blacks in Birmingham. So when we went to church, it was the start of a new church. It was in the basement of a house. And when we went, it was just little children and the pastor at first, till our parents followed us back to church. Then adults went to attending. Then we had to stop talking.
What do you remember about segregation?
I remember that segregation kept you from everything, from going to the movies, from eating in restaurants, eating at snack bars. It kept you from everything. But you would have to make sure you read the signs, because the signs that said white or colored, you have to know that you would not go into a place that had a white sign on it. You wouldn't drink out of a water fountain that had the word white right over it. You wouldn't drink out of that. You had to learn to read the signs. And those signs dictated what you could do and what you couldn't do. And if you went and drank out of those water fountains that said white, you would be in real trouble and might get beat up or sent in the bus, in the front of the bus where white people were sitting. You always made sure you sat in the back of the bus behind the sign that says colored. You had to sit there. Otherwise, if there was no seats, you just stood up. Even though that was behind the seats that says white, there'd be a lot of seats. You crowded in the back, in the very back, and that's where you rode the bus. So segregation, my mama had to teach us about it real well. Otherwise, if we stepped across the wrong line, we could get killed. We could get hurt. We could get our parents hurt. So we were very aware, and we saw pictures and news stories all the time of people getting beat up. In Life magazine, there's a picture of my sister getting pinned against the wall by hoses. It's in Life magazine's best pictures. You can see that's my baby sister. Her name is Ann, and we saw that on TV before we went downtown. We saw my sister getting pinned against the wall.
Would that have been during the Birmingham Children's March?
That's been during the time of Bull Connor, who was the mayor of St. Louis, of Birmingham, and he was an oppressive mayor, and he was to get dogs sicked on us. Big German Shepherd dogs would bite us, hurt us if we came to demonstration. He didn't care how little you were or how young you were. If they saw us sitting on this bench right now, we'd get arrested and beat up.